Hi everyone. Okay, so I was looking at my Husky pup and decided that you guys have asked me about backgrounds on drafting film, and this is just going to be like one method. I'll explain 2 or 3 different ways of changing your background as I go through this, but I thought I'd just give this one a little background before I get him all mounted up and framed. So I thought I'd take the opportunity and just get the camera rolling as well. So I'm going to use PanPastels for this, but if I just want to discuss a couple of things before we dive into any colour. First of all, when I cut this from a big sheet, for some reason I usually cut my pieces really big with a great big allowance. I wish I'd cut this one a good couple of inches bigger all round, and I didn't. So it's the edge of the paper is there where that magnet is, and if you can just see that, I think we're at full zoom. There we go, there's the edge of the magnet. So I wish I'd cut it a little bit bigger. I usually allow myself more space. I have no idea why I didn't for this. So obviously drafting film is, you know, sort of something that you can use both sides of. So let me just pull a sheet out here. I've got some tucked away underneath. So I use the Grafix 0.005 micron thickness, which is nice and thick. The thinner one just tends to, the thinner one you can see through a little bit more. It's a little bit less opaque, a bit more translucent. But this one's nice because it's quite firm and less likely to get a crease in. If you get a crease in drafting film, you kind of, well, have to start again really, or deal with the crease. You can't get rid of it. Now, you can layer your film, so you could, if you wanted to, create your background on either this sheet of drafting film, working both sides, and then you can pop that underneath. Or, obviously originally I was just going to use a white background under my drafting film, and I do want it white. I want it to be left white everywhere that I've got the pup itself. I want no colour spoiling that, and I've already worked both sides of the film as well for the pup, for the whiteness, but the popping under of the white paper makes all the difference. If you wanted to just change the background colour, you can just pop in, I mean, this is just like a tan colour, but of course you can just pop in a different colour underneath, and again, you see that changes the whole feel of the pup as well. So you could do it where you cut the actual shape out, but it's a little bit fiddly. So that's good. If you're thinking about popping a whole different colour paper underneath, then you need to be thinking about that when you're actually creating your piece. Now, when I created my piece, I was fully aware, really, that I wanted white under there. I wanted this to pop and all these colours to be true. Sometimes you want to put in a different colour paper underneath, like a blue or anything really that really sort of makes your image pop, but we want white underneath for the actual dog itself. So let me just take this away. For those that have watched the live draw along sessions, I think late last year and possibly September-ish time maybe, we did do a whole session on using stencils and things and PanPastels and erasing different things. So one way of creating the background would be to do it on a different sheet of paper and then pop that underneath. So what you could do would be to possibly, you know, sort of sketch out just your outer line drawing, your outer edge, then create your background on a separate sheet and then just pop it underneath when you are mounting. Just, you know, stick the two together with some corner picture stickies. Again, I've done a little video on that as well. The only thing with that is, again, it can be very, very muted. What I'm going to do is possibly work both sides of the film, but let me just pick up a couple of colours. So what I've got here are a couple of my soft tools. I've got the rounded one and the oval one. And here, people have been asking about these. I'm going to pop these up in a separate post. These are some makeup brushes, and they come in lots of different shapes. I've got another little one. Different shapes and sizes. So there's another little one there, and they come quite like almost like long slits and also rounded ones, small rounded ones. and they are wonderful for a really soft application. And again, if you've watched that draw along session, I demonstrated just how well sponges and other applicators compared to these, so they all give a slightly different application. These work really softly and they're great for softening edges, especially on like a bokeh effect. If you've got a harsh edge, you'll probably notice if you've watched the flower video, I've used this just to soften some of my edges after using the soft tools themselves. Soft tools are the official PanPastel applicators, and these, like I say, I think I bought 8 or 10 of these brushes for about £10, I think, possibly less, possibly more. I think mine came in from overseas, so they took a bit longer to arrive. So I'm just going to pick up, I've just got a sheet of Clairefontaine here. I'm just going to pick up some colour, so just one sweep, pick up the colour, and then we'll just pop it down. So you can see there, it's not going down very brightly on this paper, so I might need to get a paper with some more tooth just to demonstrate this. But I'll just show this quickly, and again, this is quite a good thing to show anyway, because it shows, this is a smooth paper, this is Clairefontaine paint on, so it's very smooth, but this is giving a really lovely effect. So if you wanted to paint a really lovely soft drawing, this would give you a really nice effect to do that with. The coverage is going on, and again, it won't damage your tools at all. That is actually really nice and soft. So if we then laid this over the top, you can see it's very, very muted. I'm just going to grab a sheet of Lux Archival, which I know will absorb the colour super bright, and then we'll do exactly the same and pop that underneath, just so you've got a nice comparison. So here's a sheet of Lux Archival. Now you can see straight away, obviously the Lux isn't super bright white like the Clairefontaine or even the Pastel Matte, but it should give us a lovely vivid application. So you'll see here the pigment will go on. I've just got to be a little bit more careful with my applicators here. Zoom in a tiny bit. So again, just a nice sweep of pigment. Lay that down. This is just basically to show you a really nice saturation of pigment underneath or through the sheet of film. Okay, so you can see there just a comparison between this paper which is sanded and this paper which is smooth, as to how much pastel actually grips. But if I flick the back, there's no dust coming off either of them. So they both hold the pastel really well. It's just the sanded paper grips pigment a lot more, so you get a lot more saturation. So now, remember, that's what it's like laid over the Clairefontaine, and that's what it's like laid over the Lux Archival. So you can create a lovely soft, let me just lighten that up a little bit. A lovely soft, muted effect coming through there. Okay. But what we are going to do is we are going to do background, actually both sides of the drafting film itself. So just to demonstrate the application, I'm just going to get a sheet of film here, exactly the same thickness as I've done the Husky pup on, and we'll just do that same application again using a sheet of this. Okay, so the colours I've got here are turquoise, which is beautiful. So a nice sweep, and Can you see? This is smooth, remember? What I've just demonstrated to you, this is super smooth. And this is what I want for the Husky pup. We could go on here, and I'll actually show you in a second. We could go on here with something like Pitt pens. I'll demonstrate with the watercolor pens, which are the same as the Pitt pens, but obviously they've got watercolor pigment in. You can use inks, paints, watercolor pencils and add water. There's lots of different ways of doing this, but PanPastel going on here is soft, and that's what I want. I want a really, really soft, just addition of the background to a Husky. I do not want to detract from the Husky, it just needs something there. So all I'm going to do is just lay down, this one here is phthalo blue tint. So again, I'm just going to pick up a sweep. So this is going to be paler again. Remember, we're going to be putting this straight onto our film, and what I'll do is I'll work both sides as well. So this is the phthalo blue shade. And as well, I'll go in with just a hint of white as well. And white just fills it nicely. I'm probably going to use just the turquoise and white, maybe a little of the phthalo blue. I'm probably not going to put in the darks. I just literally want to take the edge off the film itself and give it something. So I'm just going to turn that over now. I'm going to zoom in on that so you can see a little bit closer. There we go. So I'm going to turn that over. You can see the other side. So this is what would happen if you were working on the back. There's the front. So actually the front's looking a lot more vivid. Once you turn it over, it's even more muted. So let's umph a little of the colours up a little bit just by, I'm going to add a touch on the reverse of just a few of these colours. So that's the phthalo blue shade. Turquoise next. And the phthalo tint. And the white. It's really hard, you can hardly see the white going down. I know it's going down because I picked some up on my applicator. So if we turn that over now, and you can see that it has boosted it where you've done it on the front and back. And you can erase, remember, I'm just looking to see if I've got an eraser to hand. Got a big eraser. Let me just grab that one. It's not the ideal eraser for this, but it will work. Okay, so you can come in, let's say, and start to lift off. That's just with a putty rubber. So you can lift off as well. So if you did, you know, this creates quite a nice texture actually. It's a bit like rag rolling. I actually quite like it. Maybe we will do that on the background. But that's quite nice. But see here where, if I do it here, now it's lifting off, but there's pigment on the reverse. So if we do the same on the reverse, you'll get like a double mottled effect working either side. So that gives quite a nice pattern to it. Messes up your putty rubber a little bit. That's only one thing I'd say. So maybe possibly use blue tack or something else to be lifting away, something that's not quite as dear as your putty rubber. So one thing I was going to show you was, let's have a look at, I've got a couple of watercolor pens here, which are the same kind of theory as using something like your Pitt pens or a marker pen and then adding water. I'm just going to grab a couple of similar blues here. We've got a turquoise, a cobalt green and a dark indigo. Right, okay, so here I'm literally going to just sweep a little bit of pigment on. Again, you hardly need anything. And then a little touch of my dark indigo. And then we just want to add a little bit of water. Okay, so I've got some water. And what I'll do is I'm just going to add some water here. You don't need much at all. So I drag that out. And then we'll just do the same on this side. But you can create some lovely effects on here using, can you see that? It's like a line through there. It's almost like that's a damage line. Because see, I filled that, or it's repelling. There's something there that's repelling the water, which isn't good. Let's just bring in some more of that pen. They are lovely, these pens. Put another blue there, actually. Put down a bit more pigment. So this, like I say, you'd be able to put it down, but then you'd need to wait for it to dry. So I'm just going to pull some of this liquid that we've already got down in here and just push it around a little bit. But this would then dry really nicely. It's already starting to dry there, actually. And same as with other watercolour techniques, you could come in, you could put some salt on here and then that would all splay out really nicely as it dried. You could come in with a little bit of a rag and roll over it as well. Lots of different effects that you can achieve. So again, with your PanPastel or your background, anything that you do on here, so I'm just going to screw up a little bit of paper there. Cling film works really well as well. So again, you can just come in, lift off a little bit, let it dry, and you've got a lovely different kind of technique there. It's very much like brusho. I have got brusho here as well. That's just looking to see what I've got to hand. I've got a pot. It's dark brown. But yeah, brusho is fantastic. It gives you some wonderful effects. As you can see there, that's drying already. So again, you could do that on both sides. You can make it as bright as you wanted. I'm actually liking this. I'm thinking now, do we do that as the background instead of the PanPastel? Do you know what I mean? So try things out. Don't be scared to try things. I think that looks fab. And again, I'm going to lift off a little bit more as it's drying. You could come in, add it again, but don't be afraid to add water or liquids to your drafting film. I'm just thinking, actually, whilst we've got this here, how about I just show you something quickly with inks as well. I've got inks here to hand. So I'll grab those and we'll do a little ink one as well. Then you've seen it then in action. The only thing I'm not going to show is the Pitt pencils. I'll show watercolour pencils as well. Let's do all of them. Okay, so just mark them up. There's our PanPastel. There's our watercolour pens. And you can see they're drying so soft. And again, you could put something else on the back and that would work lovely. So I'll get this coloration there. Got a white sheet here somewhere. Let me just turn that one over. There we go. Pop that underneath. There we go. That shows it up a little bit more vividly as well. So we've got a PanPastel at the top, the watercolour pens at the bottom. If you're using the watercolour pens or anything liquid, make sure you're working completely flat. I'm a teeny tiny bit of an angle here. So you can see it's just pulled a tiny bit down the bottom there. So let's just come in next. I picked up a couple of watercolour pencils, my Albrecht-Dürers. So I'm going to come in again. I'm just going to lay down some pigment quite randomly. colours I'm using, I think that's sky blue and a bluish turquoise. All I'm doing is just trying to get a bit of pigment down there quickly. Now let's get my brush again, take off a lot of the water, and then just come in again. So you can just push this around. This is coming up lovely as well. But I can see here, I think this is maybe where I've handled the film. It's repelling. So water will repel, but also I've probably got grease down on that sheet. Let me move this down. It's reflecting the light. Can you see this isn't sticking as well? Possibly because the watercolour pencils seem to be, even though I've been told it's the same contents in the pencils and the pens, I can quite clearly see that it's not. Let me just come in again over the top. So you can come in here, let's put more pigment in here. Let's see if that helps. And then we'll come in with almost a dry brush because we've still got liquid down here, and see if we can push it around then. But it gives a really interesting effect. Great if you wanted to do splishy splashy water effect, that is. So I'm going to take off most of the liquid. Just using a little bit of kitchen paper just to take off most of the liquid. And there, you can see it's picking up the effect of the brush. Now that will soften and dry, but that is perfect if you want to get that kind of texture. The light's reflecting, but it's not that lovely smoothness that we're getting from the watercolour pens or the PanPastel. So the last thing I'm going to show, so I get this brush dried out. Now my inks are water-based inks, so that's fine. And I've got just a couple of the Winsor & Newton inks here, the Ultramarine, and I've got a blue. So as I get them open, it's a while since I've used them. So let me just get a little bit of the ink. Take off the excess. And then come in with our inks as well. Now the inks are going on lovely and smoothly. So here you can see a little bit of residue, that's on my brush. So if you were going to use inks, definitely make sure your brush is really, really clean. Clean that all off. And let's go in with a little bit of ultramarine. I don't know if you can see here where I did that rag rolling over on the watercolour pens. Look how beautifully that's just dried up. Pale and lovely. I am tempted, you know, to use that for the background. But at least this way I've demonstrated to you how the others work. Okay, this is the ultramarine. Not much difference in the blues there, to be honest. A little bit more vivid. What I like about the watercolour pens as well is because we're working on film, it's not pooling out. Like on pastel mat, there's a little bit of a risk of it bleeding. So again, I've scrunched up some of my tissue here just to create a nice little scrunch at the bottom. Let's just come in, lift some of this off. And then we just watch that dry, like watching paint dry. But there you can see using the liquids on the film. So if you did it on the reverse as well, you'd be able to lift the vibrancy up. Let me just mark what that is. So that is watercolour pencils up here. And this is inks, the water-based inks are ever dyes. Yep. So let's pop inks there. So that was just a nice quick little demo there. So we did put the PanPastel down, we can have it smooth, we can use both sides to give it a little bit of oomph. We can go in and use an eraser to take some of it off if we want to add some texture. Watercolor pens, again, we've just done one side, added water, dragged it around, there's 3 colours in there, added a bit more pigment in it, and again rolled around with our tissues. The inks, beautifully it's laid down again, lovely mottled effect there. That would look beautiful with a little bit of purple in there as well into ultramarine. And the watercolour pencil, again, once it's dried, if you're looking for that kind of effect, let me zoom in, that would work really well, like say for some splashes in the water, some kind of texture, some kind of movement in the piece. Obviously I want something nice and still for the background of the Husky. I am liking those watercolour pens and I am tempted. I think we might just go for it actually. So PanPastel would be really easy. I know lots of people probably have got those, but let me demonstrate, I think, this background using the watercolour pens because it's something that not everyone has got. You can get hold of them because you can get like cheaper versions of watercolour pens excuse me, to use. I'm using the Faber-Castell Albrecht Duras, which aren't the cheapest. It's what I've got to hand, but it gives that same effect, and I really am loving the effect. And this is just a quick way. Try out some of the things that you've got. If you're not sure about how something's going to work yourself, just give it a go like that, and then you've got this to refer back to as well. I could try other things on here. I've got other pens, I've got other paints. You could just use your marker pens. Let me grab those. I'm not going to add solvent to them, that's the only thing. So let me just grab a turquoise-ish colour and a blue colour. And then what we'll do is I'll just put these down and then lay Husky over the top so you can see the effect. So here is our Pitt pen, and again, if you wanted to do this effect here, what we've done with the watercolour pens, you could use it in solvent, but I'm having a bad reaction to solvent at the moment, so I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be demonstrating that, sorry. So here, and you could probably come in here actually. Let me just try it. I think I've got a little brush to hand. Yeah, a little dry brush. So I've got a little dry brush there. Let me zoom in. So a little dry brush. I'm going to come into those markers. So there, you can see, you can push that pigment around anyway. Break it up, drag it about. Soften it up. Just by using a dry brush. And then you could flip that over. I'm just going to use it on this dirty piece to do it. Flip that over if you wanted to up the brightness. Put some more on the reverse. And these are the Faber-Castell Pitt pens. So you can see it's kind of repelling on the film a little bit. But it's fine, it still goes on. It still goes on there. So I'm just going to blend that out a little bit. You could do it really nice and smoothly if you wanted. But there goes to show you don't need to use a solvent. Bring that back in. Pop that over the top. And you can see there. Gives it a nice soft effect. And these are all drying really nicely. I just love how the watercolour pens have dried. The inks are drying lovely there as well. So like I say, whatever you've got to hand, soft pastels would work. You just need to rub them in a little bit. Obviously you can use your pencils. It's really hard to get a smooth effect using colour pencils on a background on film. So I'm pretty much convinced I'm going to go for the watercolour pens. You can see what results you can get with the PanPastels, but I'm going to go for these watercolour pens. I just have to make sure that I grab 3 that I used for this little demo. There they are. I do have a warm grey there that I could bring in as well. I might bring that in as well. So there we go, that's decided it. It's not going to be a PanPastel background, it's going to be a watercolour pen. So thank you for much watching this little bit, and we will go on to doing the background tutorial now, and I'll pop that up as a separate video. But this hopefully has just shown you not to be nervous about application. Just before I do go, we've got our PanPastels up here. I just want to demonstrate this little applicator as well. Just tap off any excess there. Pull the PanPastel down again. Let me zoom in for you. Now this just applies it much softer. You get much less application going down with one of these tools. And you can see that you're going to have excess powder there as well. But this is great if you want a much softer application. This is the tool that you want. It puts down, like I say, much less pigment. I've pushed that pigment around now so that I don't have to have any excess. There's a little bit of excess powder there, but that gives a beautiful, soft, muted effect. Right, so thank you very much for watching that. I hope it's helped a little bit just to demonstrate a few little things on the film of what you can and can't do. There's loads of other things you can do. But those are just a few things I had to hand, and I wanted to show you liquids on here. So join me for the Husky background tutorial, where I will be using those watercolour pens exactly like I've shown you here, just to finish a little Husky off. There you go, that's him laid over the top. You can see none of those are really... The inks work well, actually. That's just enough coming through. But we're going to be working on our actual film of the Husky pup. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall speak to you all again very soon.